Hello viewers at home and those tuning in from Facebook Live. Thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Dinner Guide. I am your host Chef Andy, and today we're going to be going very simple. I'm going to be showing you a very simple Githeri dish, and I hope some of you will be able to enjoy. And for those of you who may not actually be able or know how to make this, then this is the show for you. We're going to proceed to introduce the ingredients in front of us. And I'll begin from the very front with one medium-sized red onion. I'm also going to use about half a cup of peas. You're going to need some fresh coriander, and of course about 2 cups of some pre-cooked Githeri mix. I'm also going to be using some carrots, about 1.5 large pieces, some beautiful corn there from the cob, some garlic, some minced ginger, 1 cube of beef stock, some mixed herbs, a bit of some beef brown sauce, and last but not least, some tomato puree. I'm going to take a break now, allowing you some time to settle down and get ready to see what's coming up next. For those of you taking notes, this is your chance to grab your pens and papers, and when we come back, we're going to get cooking. See you after a short while. Welcome back viewers. Thank you once again for tuning into BrandPlus today. We're going to proceed by chopping some onion, but before we get that far, we're going to start by heating up a pan. And next up, proceed to grab your medium-sized onion. Begin to cut that right through the middle in half. Cut a few strips right over the top. And cut across once, but not all the way to the end. Proceed to do the same for the other piece. Cut across as well, and proceed to chop that very finely. Making sure to discard the root end. Proceed to do the same for your other piece. And once done, we're going to proceed to add that to a hot pan, which we're going to proceed firstly by adding a bit of oil. I'm using vegetable oil for this recipe. I'm also going to share a little story about Githeri. I particularly managed to learn this very simple dish when I was a very young boy. I managed to get the very simple lesson from my mom, and I'm going to show you the same recipe she showed me back in the day. It's still one of the most favorite dishes. I consider my personal favorite. I hope it is going to be one of your favorites as well. So we're going to proceed to add onions into the pan. Just proceed to color those really quickly, tossing of course a few times. Proceed to grab some of your garlic cloves and begin by knocking them down over your board and chopping them very coarsely. Proceed to add your garlic to the pan and toss once more, bringing your temperature a little higher to medium at this stage. Using a wooden spoon, proceed to mix everything in your pan. And now that your aromatics are in, we're going to proceed to chop up some carrot. So very, very easily split them into quarters firstly. Cutting through lengthways, splitting into exactly 4 equal pieces, and proceed to chop those very, very, very finely. Now, one particular beautiful thing about githeri, it's actually a very, very high fiber dish. For those of you who are looking at really building a bit of fiber in your diet, this is not a bad option to go. For those of you who are also allergic to beans, this may not be the dish for you, but you can actually alternate red kidney beans or particularly nyayo beans, which we use for this dish in Kenya. You can alternate that for some peas, and it will actually be able to be a very similarly beautiful dish, and you can actually be able to consume it with any particular problems. For those of you as well who cannot have any particular products made from corn, you may actually want to also avoid using the corn for this recipe. Alternate it for any other grain out there, and you can be able to come up with your own variation. So we're going to add a bit of water to our hot pan. And now this particular step I like to use to really allow for the onions to soften very, very well. I'm also going to be using this technique because it actually allows for you to really dissolve your tomato paste very easily. So I'm going to add that in. I'm also going to add some of my brown sauce. I'm going to add also about a teaspoon of minced ginger, and also add my mixed herbs. Now proceed to finish chopping your carrots. And you can proceed to add those to the pan. And that liquid in there should allow for you to really get those carrots to soften and cook through. And it actually does no harm in adding a bit of potato to this dish. I'm not going to be adding some to this particular one, but do feel free to add even any other variety of onions. Remember, you could use leeks, you could use spring onions. It will also bring a nice, beautiful, new and fresh flavor to your dish. Just quickly toss everything together in your pan. And now you can proceed to turn your heat a little higher. Now we're going to quickly take the lid off our githeri. And now, unlike before, you can actually be able to find some pre-boiled or parboiled githeri right in your retail stores or your supermarkets. They do come in about 1 kg portions. You can also alternatively try those if you don't have enough time to actually make the recipe yourself. But I am going to also remind you there are very, very many techniques to doing this. I particularly always recommend, if you want to learn the best out of certain dishes such as these, which are more local to us, always very handy to actually give your grandmother or your mother a visit over the weekend. She'll definitely put you on par, just like my mom did for myself. So just quick toss of your carrots. Once those are nicely coated, proceed to add your githeri mixture. Also add in your corn from the cob, and last but not least, your peas. Now proceed to give that a toss. Making sure to mix everything through, and you can now proceed to add some liquid. And continue to add some water or some beef stock right up until you have the water almost reaching the top level of all your ingredients. And once you get to this part, you're basically going to allow for simmering. So you can leave that at high heat. If you do have a pressure cooker, it will actually also save you quite a bit of time. But this is actually going to continue cooking for anywhere between 10 to 12 minutes. You should actually allow for your liquid to cook almost halfway and then proceed to incorporate all your other ingredients. But before we get to that part, I will stop you there, allow you to get some fresh air, freshen up, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how to finish that beautiful dish, and we're going to go straight to serving, and I'll give you some serving suggestions. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be back in a short while. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are with us just before the break, we had allowed this to simmer down and the liquid is now reduced in half. We're going to proceed to add the last and final ingredients. So for that, you'll require a regular stock cube. You can alternatively use beef or chicken. It doesn't really make any difference. Now proceed to add your cube. And using your wooden spoon, proceed to mix through, of course, breaking the stock cube and giving a nice thorough mix through. And now to add a bit of some color, we've got this beautiful fresh coriander leaves. So we're going to proceed to chop this very, very finely. And now proceed to discard the stalks and add in your coriander leaves, and proceed to mix through once more. Now, one particular other ingredient you could also add to that would be potatoes. As I had mentioned earlier, I have not used potatoes for this particular recipe because we have actually done a different variation to githeri in our previous segments. And I wanted to actually show you one that is all vegetable and one that's got a bit of a beautiful color and also a very, very different approach. Another thing I could mention as well, remember githeri is very, very good for particularly cases of those who are actually looking for an alternative to eating meat. Remember, beans do carry quite a bit of protein, which is very, very handy for us. And there's also some very, very good carbs from the maize or the corn. So it's actually a very, very good and handy dish. Remember, githeri can be consumed by any particular ages, but particularly for kids, you may want to serve this to kids anywhere above the age of 6 to 8 years. Because for that particular stage, you do have your children teething already, and it will actually be a little easier to consume. I'll also mention that it is a very much looked down upon dish, and there is also very many other variations coming in as we continue. There's so many recipes out there online. You can actually be able to find also some very, very different names to that, and particularly places outside of this continent, they do refer to it as sacotage, which is a very much similar mixture. It just has a little less of the carrots and a little less of the peas. I'll also mention that for those of you who may actually presume githeri to be a very low class dish, it actually isn't. It's actually a very good alternative for most, although in this particular country, the less privileged are very much a fan to this. So for some of you who actually may have even home cooks who like to make this at home, you may want to share the recipe with them. They may actually start to appreciate the dish a little more. I personally have tried about 6 to 8 variations of this, and you do actually really get to see a very different approach every single time. Now we are going to proceed to serving this, so I'm going to begin by first turning down the heat completely. And we're going to give that one final mix with our ladle. And now you can proceed to serve your githeri in a nice big plate. We're going to serve about one adult portion. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my very simple githeri recipe. There are very many other recipes, as I mentioned. You're not limited to using what we used for this particular recipe. You can also create your own very own dishes or very own recipes at home. But for this part, I have come to the very end of the show. I will thank you once again for tuning in today. For those of you watching from Facebook Live, thank you once again for also showing your support. I will remind you to also scroll down, leave your comments, leave any particular queries you may have. We are always looking for something or some kind of feedback from you, the viewer. But from my end, I'm done now. I'm going to now take a break and enjoy my githeri. And I hope you're also going to enjoy your dinner as you come to the last part of the last hours of the day. But thank you once again for tuning in. You have been watching BrandPlus TV. My name is Chef Andy, and until the next episode of Dinner Guide, do have a lovely night and see you soon.